Hey everybody, Foley here. Welcome to the weekly news recap to the 14th to the 20th of July 2025. So this week was the Ubisoft shareholders meeting. Ordinarily these are pretty boring, but there were some interesting things that came out of it, and number one amongst them is who's going to be heading the new Tencent-backed subsidiary for Ubisoft, because this is effectively Ubisoft taking their three biggest IPs, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six, and effectively making them an autonomous unit, an autonomous company, like separate from Ubisoft. And somehow shareholders are okay with this. I wouldn't be. You're effectively extracting probably the stuff that makes the most money for Ubisoft right now and putting it in an entirely 100% owned Gmo thing. Feel like this is super illegal, but it's not anyway. Nobody's saying anything about it. Anyway, so this is partly owned by Tencent. After a $1.16 billion investment, it is effectively 100% owned by Ubisoft. So who's going to be leading it? Well, you know they scour the world looking for somebody who could definitely take the reins of this new thing, and look over Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and Rainbow Six, and they look really far. They looked really far down the fucking family tree, I guess. So they've named Charlie Gmo as co-CEO. I don't know how you're managing that, but okay. Of the new venture. This is Yves Guillemot's son. Yves Guillemot is currently CEO of Ubisoft proper. That's him. So, what possible experience does he bring? Well, he was originally. He ran their mobile studio, Aulient, who were responsible for that very racist Rainbow Six game. Remember, they had the Black Lives Matter symbol as being the symbol of the bad guys. Umbra, I think is what they were called in-game. Not a great look, and as far as I'm aware, that studio is not going anymore. Then he fucked off to make a Web3 thing. Cool. That's also not a thing anymore, as far as I can tell. And then he sneakily rejoined Ubisoft after that. So yeah, he's clearly a shining beacon of the video game industry right now. But don't worry, he'll be joined by somebody who probably should have been the CEO and not co-CEO bullshit. 35-year company veteran Christophe Duren, who is former head of Ubisoft Montreal, which is probably their most successful studio. Arguably, he's the real CEO here. Complementary backgrounds. I don't see how they're complementary in any way. Christophe Duren and Charlie Gmo bring strong industry expertise, deep knowledge of the Ubisoft ecosystem, and a shared culture of innovation. I'm not sure how much of that is Charlie. That sure seems like that's all of that is Christophe. I'm not sure what he's bringing to the table other than the name. Making sure it all stays in the family. Anyway. But yes, they brought up the nepotism, the very obvious nepotism, and he had this to say: I am Yves' son. That's not something I hide from, but my appointment isn't only about family ties, it's about what Ubisoft needs at this moment. Does it really need another failson? I've spent the last decade building experience both inside and outside Ubisoft, leading teams, managing brands. Both of his companies aren't a thing anymore. Navigating change in a fast-moving industry by not navigating it very well. I also made the conscious choice to step away when it made sense, to learn and grow elsewhere because you were given enormous shit for your very racist mobile game. Anyway, what matters now isn't my name. I think you'll find that matters quite a bit, actually. Anyway, it's the work ahead. Ubisoft is at a pivotal moment. What's expected of me is nothing, really. It's for you to sit there and soak up share price. Is to help push the company forward by bringing energy, focus, and by relying on the incredible expertise of the other guy to do all of the work. I see myself as someone here to contribute. What are you contributing? Support and help create the right conditions. Create the right conditions are in place for everyone. Okay. To be fair, this is probably in French and translated, but anyway. To do their best work. Anyway. Tencent owns a minority stake in the spun-off company, which is 100% controlled and consolidated by Ubisoft. So, this is kind of a little bit of background info that isn't kind of brought up here in this article, but Ubisoft have been looking for a way to take themselves private again. And I have seen, or it's my opinion, that this subsidiary company that they're making, that's also taking their best performing IP and turning it into a completely autonomously run thing, but also has a Guillemot at the head, is their way of effectively extracting value out of Ubisoft proper. And that they'll eventually sell off this subsidiary, sell it to Charlie Guillemot, probably, is the way they'll get around it. Because Yves really, really doesn't want to step down, even though he's had so many reasons that he should have. Never mind the share price. There's so many other kind of massive scandals at Ubisoft. Reasons why he shouldn't be in charge anymore, but whatever. Anyway, that wasn't the only thing going on at the shareholder meeting. Never mind the nepotism. Because we also have the shareholders themselves, who appear to be not exactly up to date on the video game industry. Anyway, so again, same Ubisoft shareholder meeting in front of a less than impressed audience. This is kind of an example of a glaring indictment of how much the shareholders know about the company they're invested in. So this one thing is from a alleged 20-year individual shareholder, and if he really was a 20-year shareholder, you should really know better. He's talking about the disappointment at the catastrophic share price. Again, if he had really been there for 20 years, he would know that that share price was massively inflated because of a Vivendi hostile takeover attempt, which is what pushed the share price up so significantly. And he would know that if he was actually a 20-year, well, actually 20 years. It might even be older than that by now. But the point is, the Ubisoft share price is back to like where it would be if Vivendi hadn't tried to take them over. Anyway, he demanded to know what Ubisoft is doing about Valorant. Nothing, I guess. It's a 5-year-old game. A game that a lot of people have been talking about, have being the operative word here, that it's not really talking about it anymore, that could steal sales from Ubisoft. Now, how exactly you would steal sales from Ubisoft considering Valorant is a free-to-play game? I don't know, but whatever. This is a shareholder, a 20-year, whatever. Anyway, I'm unhappy with the share price, yada yada yada. I'm very disappointed with lots of other things, but my real concern is I don't recognize Ubisoft that I once knew in the past. How is it that the head of HR saw nothing? So this is talking about the sexual harassment scandals that kind of rocked Ubisoft 5-6 years ago, something like that, and it would kind of be in the news in France right now because the lawsuit, the sexual harassment, sexual abuse case has only just wrapped up there, so we would kind of still be in the news. Anyway, this was attempted to be answered by him, but it's not really an answer. The company was not found liable isn't really the best answer here to why didn't anybody see anything. Why did we have to wait to hear about it from a third-party investigation, you know? We weren't found liable, though. That's like, that's not like the first thing you say. That's not great. Anyway, technically, no, the company itself was not found liable, but like, that's only because you got rid of the 3 guys who ended up getting sued. That's the only. Anyway, going back to Valorant, it seems like all gamers love it. I mean, I don't, but okay. If they love it, that means it's going to be a drop in sales for Ubisoft. So what's your take? Again, Valorant's 5 years old. It's a free-to-play game. And Ubisoft typically make boxed premium, products. Like, they don't really make any of these kind of free-to-play things. Like, Rainbow Six Siege has, like, just gone in a bit of a free-to-play thing. But for the most part, certainly when Valorant came out anyway, Ubisoft didn't have as far as I'm aware, free-to-play thing. Anyway, Valorant has been around for about 5 years. Second, it might seem odd that a free-to-play first-person shooter from Riot Games could threaten the sales of a company more focused on single-player or cooperative titles with premium price tags. So, like, Siege, I think, is their only, like, competitive thing. And they stopped making Cross-Defiant. And I guess there is, like, a PvP mode in The Division. But really, it's a cooperative game. Anyway, yeah, their thing was basically it's not really something we're concerned about, and said something about Rainbow Six being, positioned to effectively handle that niche, but whatever. Shareholders being, kind of out of touch isn't exactly new, but it's always important to get the reminders that companies being beholden to their shareholders, when the shareholders are fucking idiots, this is why you get terrible decisions made. Anyway. Moving on, because that wasn't the only stupid thing a shareholder brought up. Ubisoft shareholder confronts boss about woke Assassin's Creed. So yeah, we got the fucking woke guys in on the shareholders as well. So that's good. One angry gamer went full debate me mode at the head of Ubisoft. So I believe this is a case of somebody buying one share and effectively getting to being allowed to say something at the shareholder meeting. Kind of feel like there should be like a threshold for how many shares, but maybe that's a bit freedom of speech kind of thing. Like if you have one share, you kind of are entitled to speak. Anyway, whatever. First of all, regarding Assassin's Creed Shatters, there's been a lot of controversy regarding that game. Has there? Has it all been manufactured in some way? Anyway, how do you respond about the woke shit? Ubisoft has been accused and criticized for this wokeist trend. I mean, the fact that he used the word wokeist should really just bar him from saying words ever again in public. Woke or no woke, how do you explain Ubisoft's deteriorated reputation for making shit games, guys? And putting them out before they're ready, which may actually challenge the foundations of your organization. Is that a show of openness on your part, or are you going to backtrack or backpedal on that leftist political agenda? Reminder, this is in France. Anyway, is there room in the entertainment world for that kind of stance? And Ubisoft, Yoshimo didn't really answer the question. But yes, Assassin's Creed Shadows dogged by no shortage of manufactured outrage online prior to launch. It was a lot of these kind of tourist gamers just coming up with reasons not to like things and trying to shoehorn in their anti-woke bullshit. Anyway, we won't rehash the whole, oh, he's a black guy samurai, even though it's an historically accurate person. And even if they weren't, it's a fucking video game. Grow up. Anyway, whatever answer there was, mostly just said that it was a creative decision. We'll back anybody who has those creative decisions. It's about being an adventure, and it's a heroic journey, and some other stuff. Anyway, but yeah, these are the kind of shareholders that video game publishers are beholden to. Apparently, not the customer. No, you could never do that. Why start a business making a cool thing and make your customers actually want the cool thing? I don't know. Anyway, but it's not just the shareholders that are stupid. It's, of course, the upper C-suite management. Ubisoft CEO thinks Star Wars Outlaws failed because the brand was less popular. No, Star Wars Outlaws failed because everybody saw how fucking buggy it was when it launched. Anyway, game did not perform as well as expected because you really shouldn't have given it like another year, but whatever. Anyway, Ijimo was saying that no, the reason it didn't perform well is because Star Wars the brand is in a bit of choppy waters. No? Not really? I mean, does it have the same... Star Wars is a somewhat like perennial brand, it's going to be popular or have a base level of popularity regardless. Are there times when it's had a higher level of popularity? Yes. But at the time when Star Wars Outlaws came out, it was at its usual, typical level. I wouldn't say it was any less or more. Maybe you could argue the films have kind of ruined it a little bit. I don't know. But the TV shows have kind of brought it up. I guess it had somewhat of a... If it had come out like in and around Andor, to be honest, I think it would have been shit on more than it actually was. You might think that Andor would boost its reputation, but I actually think it would be taken less well. Anyway, also had to say that the game had a few items that still needed to be polished, and they were polished and debugged in the early weeks, but it did affect sales volumes. Again, that's the real reason it didn't perform well. It's because it was really fucking buggy when it came out. And going back to our woke guy, the reason Ubisoft's reputation has tarnished in recent years is the same reason. Because they kept putting their games out when they weren't ready. And they've been making the same game with a different IP, but the same fucking game for like 20 years now at this point. They just make their open world map porn games. That's it. All of their IPs have turned into that. They don't have anything unique, really, going for them, except Siege, pretty much. Anyway, the last thing with Ubisoft, because this is kind of clashing with news from last week, but the Stop Killing Games petition was largely created in response to how Ubisoft sunset The Crew 2. Again, a niche that they're not doing. They're just not really doing racing games anymore either. Anyway, Ubisoft's own shareholders demand a response to the Stop Killing Games consumer movement. So this was brought up, and I think this was actually brought up by the woke guy as well. But anyway, Ubisoft's decision to shut down Open World Racer, The Crew's servers last March, is kind of what triggered this whole Stop Killing Games petition in the first place. Regarding the petition, we operate in a market. This is from the CEO. And whenever we release a game, we provide a lot of support for that game. Citation needed. We also provide a lot of services to make sure that the game is accessible and remains playable 24/7. Yeah, servers definitely don't go down, ever. That doesn't happen. Anyway, this kind of issue is not specific to Ubisoft. All video game publishers are faced with that issue. You provide a service, but nothing is written in stone, and at some point the service may be discontinued. Nothing is eternal, yada yada yada. What he's basically talking about is we can't provide a service game indefinitely, kind of thing. That, you know, at some point we'll have to step away from keeping the servers running and what have you. Now the problem here is that that's not what the Stop Killing Games petition is about. The Stop Killing Games petition is, we are totally fine with you ending support for the game whenever you choose. What we're asking is that you have some kind of plan when you end support that allows players to keep playing it even if the servers aren't up anymore. That's what they're looking for. We are in favor of publishers ending support for a game whenever they choose. Well, maybe not whenever they choose, but what we are asking for is that they implement an end-of-life plan to modify or patch the game so that it can run on customer systems with no further support from the company being necessary. And they point out that 2 games have done this in the past. Gran Turismo Sport and Knockout City have both made their games playable offline, effectively, indefinitely. So him bringing up the servers and the services and stuff like that is not what the petition is looking to do. And a lot of the lobbying groups that are going after the EU about the Stop Killing Games petition are bringing up the same thing, that it would be expensive for them to keep servers running indefinitely. The Stop Killing Games petition is not asking for that. They're asking for you to actually think ahead what happens when the servers aren't there anymore and have the game still be playable in some form. Anyway, moving on. So there was a Secret Sauce showcase, which is showing off a couple of games. This was being hosted by Off-Brand Games. There's a couple of different like indie games that were shown off. I'm going to go through a couple of them. We're not going to go through the whole thing because it's like 40, I think, or something games. So it's the usual thing for recaps. I'm going to pick out a couple of games that I thought looked pretty good. And games that I haven't shown on the channel before. So first up is The Lacerator. So The Lacerator is sort of a grindhouse survival horror kind of game. And what I kind of thought interesting here is, and by the way, yes, the guy is pantsless in those scenes. Anyway, so you're playing a porn star and you're shooting on location, and some things go wrong as you're shooting on location, and you are trapped in this kind of maze hunting room of the Lacerator, who is gonna do some lacerating, and you can be lacerated during the game. So you can lose limbs, you know, you can lose your foot, you can lose your hand, you can lose your dick, apparently at some point, and all sorts of other kind of weird shenanigans going on. What's interesting is that the game, you know, just keeps going. You know, you just make do, and you do get some like kind of other things you can show here. Like if you still have both your legs, you wouldn't have the option to crawl under the tables and stuff like that. But even like later on, like here, you can't climb up to reach that ladder. If you had 2 legs, maybe you would be able to climb up to reach the ladder. But you're not like at a disadvantage if you lose a limb. You are for a little bit, but as you can see there, you can get like a chainsaw attached to your leg and stuff like that. It's an interesting idea, and it does sort of remind me of the game. What's it called? Never Dead, where you could like effectively like fight as just a head flying about the room and stuff like that. But that didn't review so well. So we'll see how the Lacerator pulls out. And I assume there'll be like runs where you're like, I'm going to try to play the whole game and not lose a limb, and then I'm going to try to play the whole game where I lose all of my limbs kind of thing, and just see what happens. Anyway, that was one of them. Demo available. It's actually out now as well if you want to check it out. Art of Reflection. So there's two games that had sort of a kind of trippy puzzle gimmick to them. So the Art of Reflection is like mirrors and being able to kind of jump in between like different flipped horizontal axes and stuff like that. So you need to be able to get line of sight on this red ball. That's effectively what allows you to jump into mirrors and stuff like that. So yeah, there's going to be some elements of like really trippy shit going on with this thing, and I love these kind of puzzle games. I mean, Portal is kind of what started it, but then there's things like Antichamber, Superliminal, Entropy Center, stuff like that. They all have like kind of interesting gimmicks that make them really kind of fucking with your brain a little bit. Anyway, Art of Reflection is going to be using like reflections, as you might imagine, as its central gimmick, coming out near the end of September this year. And then the other one is Stretchmancer. And Stretchmancer is still kind of taking the axes kind of thing, but what it does is it allows you to kind of stretch the x-axis, stretch the y-axis, stretch the z-axis, all that kind of stuff on individual items. It's not clear if like every item can be stretched, but it certainly seems like most of the props can be, and the rooms and what have you. And I think it's the idea of you just have to touch a wall or something like that. And then the kind of like in universe, it's sort of like a Saturday morning cartoon in some ways. Like it's very slapstick, it's very silly. And I do think that will be like a lot of fun. Anyway, a Stretchmancer, I think it had a demo available like a month ago or a couple of months ago. As part of Next Fest, but I missed it. Anyway, but it is available to wishlist on Steam. Okay, so we're gonna change a little bit. This isn't really a Saturday morning cartoon anymore. So this is Verho. It has a subtitle, but I don't remember what it is. But it's very much Kingsfield again. First person kind of clunky melee combat, and I'm still waiting for because there's been a few of them now in the last 5 years or so. Like Lunacid, I think, is another one. That are kind of taking this like first person Souls in some ways. It's kind of what Kingsfield was, and I'm still waiting for one to like really wow me, I guess. And it might be this one, it might be a different one, it might be Lunacid. I actually haven't played Lunacid yet, so that might be it. But more of this, more of this until we get what they call it, saturation, because there's way too many Souls games nowadays, and there's probably going to be way too many of these at some point. Anyway, demo available for Verho at some point, and that is a giant snake blacksmith, which I thought was really fun. Anyway, last one as part of the secret sauce is Alabaster Dawn. So this is from the same developers as Crosscode, and it is a really nice looking isometric old school pixel RPG, although I think it is somewhat real time. And I've been meaning to play Crosscode because I've heard some really good things about it, but I haven't had a chance myself. Anyway, I think it looks really good. There's a lot of like interesting things going on with the combat. Like it's also somewhat real time. There are some turn-based elements to it as well, but it is doing things that you don't typically see in these kind of pixel art games, especially the ones that they're trying to kind of pay homage to. Like a lot of the times you be bound by walls and paths and what have you in pixel art games, and you can kind of just... I'm gonna see if I can find it, because there's a scene where they do something that I just really wasn't... Yeah, it's here. Okay, I need to go back a little bit. And this is gonna seem really like a silly thing to be really impressed by, but I am really impressed by it. I don't know why. Anyway, it's here, because normally you wouldn't expect, in like an old school RPG, you wouldn't be able to just freely jump from one spot, from one like higher level point to a lower level point, and you can just do it. in the game, which is, again, that's, as I say, it's a silly thing to be kind of impressed by, but I am really impressed by that. Anyway, I don't think this has a release date. I think it's just a wish list thing. Be a demo at some stage in August. No, not August. September. Anyway, outside of that showcase, though, we had some other things. So Echoes of the End had a much extended gameplay trailer, and it's kind of going for like the newer God of War kind of thing. I'm just going to skip ahead to some combat. Yeah, so it's going for like, you know, the newer God of War games rather than like a Soulsy type thing. How well it'll play, I don't know. It just feels a little bit clunky. But it is like a AA game, and we're not really seeing many of them. Like it does look a little bit odd. And also, it's not going to look great on YouTube because YouTube doesn't like red. And there's a lot of red here. You know, it's going to look a bit washed out, which is, you know, not the best place to show it off. But anyway, it's a fairly lengthy video. It's 15 minutes or so. You want to see if it has if it's something you're interested in. All right, moving on. Dreams of Another is the next thing from Pixel Junk. We've seen this a couple of times. This is the game where you're dreaming and everything is sort of like scattered. It's kind of in non-distinct kind of like pixel smudges type thing. And if you shoot them, they take on like a proper form, which is like, it's a really odd kind of reverse Untitled Goose Game. Not Untitled Goose Game. Unfinished Swan. I think I've made that mistake a couple of times now. Anyway, story-wise, I think it's like a PTSD thing, but it's an interesting like mechanic on the sort of ephemeralness of your dreams, and having to shoot them to make them take on an actual structure is kind of weird, and we'll see how it works out for them. Anyway, I think it's October at some point. Yeah, 10th of October. Okay. Then we have FMV game in some ways. So this is Dead Take from Surgeon Studios. Surgeon Studios are the guys who did Zao. Tales of Zao. I forget to remember of it now. Anyway, it's the sort of African fantasy Metroidvania. I forget the full name of it. Tales of something Zao. I don't remember. Anyway. But this is kind of a FMV game in some ways. You have, you know, real live action footage. It's Ben Starr, who I'm sure you've seen in a lot of games at this point. But there's a bunch of other like voice actors that you mightn't recognize visually, but you might recognize when you hear their voice. Anyway, there's a bunch of actors have joined the scene now. How exactly the game works isn't entirely clear, but it does seem to be some sort of mixing or kind of a walking simulator in some ways kind of thing, puzzle game. Anyway, that is coming out, I think it's September at some point. Just gonna skip ahead. Yeah, you have, hang on, because they have the cast here, which is pretty big. So Matt Mercer, Laura Bailey, probably better known for Critical Role. Laura Bailey plays Abby, I think, in The Last of Us. Sam Lake is Max Payne. Control. Not Alone in the Dark. Alan Wake. Alana Pierce is kind of more of like a YouTuber, video game YouTuber, who has kind of dabbling into voice work and narrative and stuff like that. The rest of the names I'm not familiar with. I think Neil Newborn is in it as well as Astarion from Baldur's Gate, but there's a lot of talent in there. I could have sworn there was an actual release date though. Yeah, end of July for Dead Take. And then last thing, TennoCon, which is the Warframe con, basically. Showing off a couple of things. So a lot of Warframe things, but also in there a little bit more from Soulframe, which is their medieval fantasy thing. Which is it's Warframe, but more swords and more medieval fantasy and no guns, basically. Anyway, this is a little bit more gameplay. A lot of it is cutscene. But one thing that did come out of the TennoCon is that they are opening the alpha, the prologue, to pretty much everybody. You still have to sign up for it. You can't just download it and play it. You still have to sign up. But there's no waiting list anymore. You effectively just get your name on the list and you can just start playing it whenever you want. Which I will probably be looking to do at some point. And see if they allow it to be streamed or recorded or what have you. Anyway, because it does look interesting, and I kind of do want to get into Warframe, but at the same time, it's been going for so long that I kind of feel like I'd rather just start at the beginning at this point. Anyway, so Soulframe Preludes is effectively the alpha, but it's open to everybody now at this point. And then over on the Epic Games Store, the free game this week is Civ 6, the Platinum Edition, which is all of the DLC, all of the expansions. It's a really good deal. So you have until Thursday to grab the Platinum Edition of Civ 6, and at that point it'll be replaced by something else. So we're coming to the end of the month, so we're going to have Game Pass's second wave for July. And I don't know why it's not magnifying that image. That's annoying. All right, anyway, we'll go ahead. So RoboCop, Rogue City, the standalone DLC for that, Unfinished Business, was out last week. So this is your chance to kind of play the original or the core game if you like the base game. It's really good. Like it's like a first-person shooter in some ways, but there's a lot of like side stories. There's a lot of like downtime where you're just talking to people in the precinct, or kind of like out on the beat, out on patrol kind of stuff. And then the main like gameplay loops of, shooting as RoboCop is really satisfying. It's a really good game. Anyway, My Friendly Neighborhood we'll talk about in a second. Back to the Dawn, I don't know what that is. Prison Escape RPG. Step into a maximum security facility where every inmate has a past. Fight to survive, investigate, blah, 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 blah. I think it's this. Is it this kind of furries prison thing? Avionic Factor was also added to PlayStation Plus. This is effectively a day one game. It's a survival crafting multiplayer thing with 6 players. Okay, I'm sure you'll probably know if you're interested in that or not. Wheel World is a kind of... It's somewhat of a relaxing open world kind of cycling game. And then Wushang Fallen Feathers, I don't think this is the full game. I think this is access to the beta? Maybe this is the full game. I might be thinking of a different game. I think it's Where Winds Meet is having its beta, and then Wuchang Fallen Feathers is coming out at some stage. So this will be a day one game. And then Grounded 2 is a game preview, so it's not the full game. But they're effectively going to be doing the same thing they did with the original Grounded, which is early access, essentially, but also on console. And then Farming Simulator is Farming Simulator. I don't think there's much else to say about that. Anyway, those are some of the games you can play soon. What if you wanted to play something right now? Well, if you have a Nintendo Switch 2, you can play Donkey Kong Bonanza. Reviews have been pretty good for it. It's kind of destructive elements that you can just destroy whatever you want. And then there's a lot of cool kind of throwbacks to some of the Donkey Kong Country games. But from what I've seen from people playing it and reviews wise, it's a lot of fun, and it's a Nintendo first party, really well polished, well made video game. There's not much else to really say about it. Okay, moving on. And we have Shadow Labyrinth. So Shadow Labyrinth is that weird Pac-Man game. It's the really edgy Pac-Man game for some reason. So it's a Metroidvania, but it's also Pac-Man. You are some guy who's woken up, amnesia, whatever, and you're bonded to, effectively, Pac-Man. And there is the kind of standard Metroid kind of combat elements to it, but there are also a lot of mazes and stuff where you have to kind of do traditional Pac-Man stuff, effectively. Actually haven't seen many reviews for this, so I'm not entirely sure how well it's been received. So I guess you might want to check it out yourselves, but it seems like it's kind of weird, but I'm kind of here for it. We have the Drifter. So I played the demo of the Drifter a good while ago, and I thought it was really good. It's a point-and-click game that's a bit like Grindhouse. kind of vibes to it, but you are the drifter. You're coming back to your hometown after being away for a while and find that people are being kidnapped and abducted and stuff like that, and you do eventually sort of have to figure out what's going on and so on, and that kind of thing. So it's a bit of a dark story with some weird shit happening, and the presentation is done really, really well. Anyway, it's the drifter. It's PC only as far as I'm aware for now. And Eric's Home, The Stole Dream. Should be The Stolen Dream, but the game trailers wrote it down wrong. Anyway, so this is an isometric real-time stealth game with a pretty strong kind of narrative element wrapped around it. And as you might imagine from the genre that I just made up, isometric real-time stealth, it's splitting people a lot, because, you know, some people really don't like real-time stealth or feel like you're like too far away from the action, you can't really tell what's going on. Some people really like it because it's you don't see too many stealth games done like from the isometric viewpoint, or if you do, it's usually part of another game, and you know, the stealth is sort of just a system in a bigger game rather than having a game that appears to be almost entirely stealth based. So yeah, it's been a bit mixed. From what I've seen, the people who like stealth games like it, and people who don't like stealth games don't like it, which I guess makes sense. Anyway, moving on, then we have a couple of ports. So I did say we talk about My Friendly Neighborhood later. So My Friendly Neighborhood we played on the channel. I thought it was really good. It's a very kind of silly survival horror, but Muppets. You know, Resident Evil, but all the enemies are Muppets kind of thing. Like, it's very funny and also kind of scary in some ways, even though they're Muppets. I really enjoyed it. And now it's available on console. So it's going to PlayStation and Xbox. As you saw, it's going to be added as part of Game Pass, but it will be available on PlayStation as well. This is technically the release date trailer, but I think they published the release date trailer literally the day it came out. So it's sort of a launch trailer as well at the same time. Anyway, it's really good. If you haven't had a chance to play it, you know, give it a shot. And then the other port is Neverwinter Nights 2. This is from Obsidian rather than BioWare. BioWare did the original Neverwinter Nights, and then Obsidian did Neverwinter Nights 2, which is kind of similar to how Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic went, because BioWare did Knights of the Old Republic 1 and Obsidian did Knights of the Old Republic 2. And in a similar vein, Obsidian did not get enough time to finish it. So the Sith Lords really should be seen as the better Knights of the Old Republic, but because it was so rushed, you know, they missed out on doing a lot of things. And similarly, Neverwinter Nights 2 was also a little bit rushed. I still think it's a good game, but I think playing it, you're just going to want to play Baldur's Gate 3. Which is maybe not as much fun. Anyway, still a good game. Unfortunately, though, it is now time to talk about the worst part of video games. Video game industry. So, Steam's adult games under threat in financial censorship move that cuts the smut. So on the surface, this seems like a good thing in some ways, because there's a lot of like low effort adult games making their way onto Steam, and it's sort of what polluting the library and what have you. And you see this also on the eShop, Nintendo's eShop, Sony PSN, what have you. They're not like as much adults only kind of game, but there's a lot of like low effort Gen AI games making their way over there, and like puzzle games that are like garbage and stuff like that. There's a lot of shit, basically, is what I'm saying. And there's a sizable chunk of that which is smut games, I suppose. Anyway, but what's happening here is there was a recent rule change slipped into Steam's terms of service or community guidelines or something like that, like essentially what kind of games are allowed to be on Steam, what kind of games are not allowed to be on Steam. And you may recall back in 2018 that Steam basically said, yeah, you can put any game you want on Steam, we don't care. If you aren't familiar, Gabe Newell is libertarian, and his effectively rules are bullshit and the market will figure it out itself. So they basically said we shouldn't be banning any type of game. We should just put whatever game that wants to be out there and effectively pays us our cut. We don't really care. Put the game out there. That was 2018. But then you see MasterCard and Visa and PayPal got in touch and they're like, yeah, we don't want anything to do with the porn games. Thanks. So that's kind of what's happening here. So adult games are being scrutinized more intensely or being removed from the platform, and people are dubbing this as financial censorship because this is not necessarily Valve's decision. This is MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, other payment services, but it's mostly those three saying, we're just not going to do business with you if you're going to have those games on the store. So Steam, protecting that side of their business, are basically coming down harder on games that MasterCard, Visa, and PayPal don't like. Can you see where this might become a problem? Because right now it's porn games, and it's not all porn games. It's like specifically games that are like incest and non-consent and stuff like that. Which, again, artistic merit potentially aside, kind of thing. Valve are okay with it. It's a third party deciding what's allowed beyond the market. That's a problem. Anyway, Steam is the most popular storefront and launcher platform on PC, and if they're not able to push back against them, then who the fuck is going to be able to push back against them anyway? It's a host to a vast and diverse library of adult-only games. There are a lot of like pretty tame things that are just like hentai puzzle games or what have you, all the way up to like non-consensual stuff. Anyway, certain kinds of adult-only content will no longer be welcome on the platform, so slipped into Steam's kind of guidelines was content that may violate the rules and standards set forth by Steam's payment processors and related card networks and banks or internet network providers, in particular certain kinds of adult-only content. So again, this is a third party dictating what's allowed on your platform in some ways. And you can say that, yeah, okay, like non-consensual sex games, I don't want to see that on the platform, or incest-based ones, I don't want to see those on the platform, bestiality, whatever, all kinds of things that are, one, illegal, and two, taboo in some ways. But the problem is it doesn't stop there. MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, a lot of them have also come under scrutiny because they are not taking payment for LGBT things, not taking payment for like sexual based documentaries, things that might be talking about sexual harassment or things that might be talking about sex workers in general, that they won't like fund them, they won't take payment for them, this kind of thing. Platforms like OnlyFans in particular won't pay out for it. Won't accept payment for it. But then you have like other social media things, like YouTube is very shadow banning things that are based on sexual things, or TikTok, Meta, and so on. Twitter obviously doesn't give a shit, but the other ones, in the name of moderation or whatever, are demonetizing what should be pretty standard part of the human experience. Like, whatever they're coming down on these low-hanging fruit to get rid of these kind of things, but at what point do they decide that, okay, now also any, like, gay rights game you don't want, that shouldn't be on your platform. Any kind of whatever else shouldn't be on your platform. This is a speech problem. This is a creativity problem. This is a censorship of art problem. And it is important to point out that it's not Valve. It's not Valve's policy for these games. As I said, they're libertarian. They don't give a shit. This is a different company, and a very US-centric companies. The US big corporations have real problems with Puritanism. Now, this is a problem. You talk to anybody in LGBT side of things or the sex worker side of things, they will absolutely tell you that MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, all of them are just shit for working with them. They just don't want anything to do with them. Anyway, it's a loose term added to their terms and conditions. It allows those financial institutions to play fast and loose with what's published on the platform. Many games have already been removed for not complying with the new rule that surfaced like a couple of days ago. Anyway, LGBTQ plus community to grow increasingly concerned about queer, transgressive, or unusual games that are flagged as explicit, because they do get flagged as explicit, even though they're not. Anyway, 2018, again, as I said, Valve effectively were like fine with adult games being put on it. Anyway, the likes of MasterCard, Visa, and Paywall now have more direction over what gets published on Steam than Steam itself. And they have more direction on what gets published on Nintendo, what gets published on PlayStation, and so on. This is a problem. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of problems, and you're ready to load, thanks. Alright, Virtuous confirms it's laying off 270 workers across Asia and Europe. So yeah, thanks for putting out Oblivion Remastered, selling really, really well and all that, and now get fucked. Now, in some ways, this isn't necessarily attached to the Microsoft layoffs, because Virtuous are an independent company that Microsoft partnered with to do Oblivion. Virtuous in general are a support studio in most cases. They don't make their own games. They help other studios make their games. Anyway, 7% of its workforce, effectively impacting about 270 roles. According to their official statement, this is done in an effort to adapt for the future of game development, which is something you've heard all of them say when layoffs come up. We are rebalancing roles across its studios, primarily in teams facing lower occupancy and slower demand due to structural shifts in the industry, which is basically saying the game is out, so we don't need you anymore. In some cases. In some other cases, it is... And we'll talk about this in a second. So 200 roles in Asia, 70 in Europe. 10 of them are in France, and they are related to the Oblivion Remastered team. So, as I said, it on the surface, it seems bad, and a lot of other outlets are saying, like, Oblivion Remastered devs, layoffs. I know that is technically true. 10 of them. It's not clear if they're actually going to be laid off or if they're just going to be moved, opportunities for redeployment, so they may just be moved to a different team. So it's not to downplay it necessarily. There are layoffs hitting the Oblivion Remastered team, a game that did really, really well, and you would argue should have done well enough that the company should be able to still keep those people. Anyway, why the Asia team had a much greater impact. So 200 of the 270 roles are hitting Asian teams. So this has to do with projects that are selectively exiting service segments where demand is weakening. So this is largely kind of the mobile game side of things. The gacha game kind of thing is hitting somewhat a bit of saturation now in Asia, particularly. There's a few too many at the moment. So some of them are seeing that they're like shutting down service effectively. And again, this is a problem when Virtuous is a support studio, that if one studio decides to shut down their project, and if they're a support team on that project, then they're affected by it as well. There's one thing that they have been mentioning, that they are trying to, get enough funds together where they can make their own games, but that hasn't happened just yet. Anyway, so Virtuous mentions that they are providing severance packages, career transition assistance, and opportunities for redeployment, which is essentially, we'll just put you on a different team. Virtuous, this year at least, have been working on Oblivion Remastered, Cyberpunk 2077, Metal Gear Solid, Snake Eater, and I think they're also working on Silent Hill F, so they're doing 2 games for Konami. I just finished Dead Island 2, like an hour ago, something like that, and they were working on that. They're in the credits there too. So they have worked on a lot of big AAA games, but you wouldn't necessarily know their name because they're only a support studio. I think the only reason people know for Oblivion Remastered is because they were the main dev on it. But again, it's not their game. It belongs to Microsoft. So yeah, they are planning to make their original games. They did expand out for a while in 2023, then they had to shut down a studio in San Francisco 2024. Then they acquired a couple of other studios, so they are trying to grow, but when you're a support studio and the main publishers are canceling games all over the place, then they are going to be affected by that kind of thing. So they really need to get their own IP, even if it's small, but it's something they can keep going with and they're not beholden to a third party. We'll see how it works out for them. Anyway, speaking of paying third parties, paying the Subnautica 2 team their promised bonus would be embarrassing, Krafton CEO allegedly told the game's chief over lunch. So yes, it's more of the Subnautica 2 shenanigans. So we're aware that the former leads of Studio Unknown Worlds were laid off, fired by Krafton, and that they have now come back with a lawsuit alleging unfair dismissal. And to kind of catch you up on the story, basically, Krafton acquired Unknown Worlds 2021, and as part of the acquisition, they paid $500 million to the company to acquire it and acquire its IP and so on. And then as part of the acquisition, Subnautica 2, they were under contract to make it, and if they managed to sell X number of units in 2025, the studio would earn a $250 million bonus, which is nuts. It's half of what they paid for just to acquire the studio in the first place. It's a lot of money. And Krafton realized it was a lot of money, and it seemed like Unknown Worlds were on track to hold up their side of the deal, basically. They were on track to get the game launched into early access later in the year. The game has enough wish lists, and the game has enough popularity, the original one, that they would easily have made, apparently, allegedly, the numbers required to trigger this bonus, and Krafton, it is alleged, didn't want that to happen. They don't want to have to pay that bonus, basically. So this article is kind of a little bit of background. It's a little bit of conjecture, anonymous sources, and so on. So you take a little bit of this with a pinch of salt. But back in May of this year, Charlie Cleveland, one of the heads of Unknown Worlds, has a meeting with Krafton's CEO, Kim Chong-han. And part of that lunchtime meeting, basically Kim says that if Unknown Worlds released the game on its planned timeline, meaning Krafton would have to pay the bonus, it would be disastrous financially and hugely embarrassing for Krafton. So they don't want to hold up their end of the bargain because it would be embarrassing and financially disastrous. Then why did you sign off on it in the first place? If you knew it was anyway. Krafton later asserts that Kim never said that, and they're instead saying that this was misinterpreted for the translators. Maybe. I kind of have a feeling that Krafton's CEO would probably have a personal translator for this kind of thing. I don't know, maybe they don't. Maybe it was they hired somebody on the day, who knows, and maybe their Korean wasn't as good as they said it was. Maybe, or that is exactly what he said. You know, again, pinch of salt here. Anyway, the lunch took place at the height of this kind of tense standoff between Unknown Worlds leadership and Krafton's publishing team. Basically, hey, we want you to not bring the game out and not have to pay that bonus. And Unknown Worlds saying, no, you agreed, it's under contract, we signed it, pay our bonus. Anyway, this is just weeks before Cleveland was then sacked, along with fellow co-founders Max McGuire and CEO Ted Gill. So we're all caught up. So this is part of the lawsuit, effectively, is that the trio alleged that Krafton engaged in desperate efforts to delay the game and therefore avoid paying the earnout. Krafton engaged in a months-long campaign to delay Subnautica 2's release. It pulled key marketing materials, refused to follow through with crucial partnerships, reneged on long-standing commitments. Multiple Krafton employees themselves suggest that these moves were for the purpose of frustrating the earnout, despite the earnout agreement's prohibition on taking actions for that purpose. It's literally in the contract that you're not allowed to do this shit. That you can't engage in behavior deliberately designed to avoid paying the earnout. Which is a real lawyer thing to add to the list. And you can't, cheat either, you fucks. Anyway, they tried all sorts of dirty tactics, and they're kind of aligned out here. They'd assign an entirely new publishing team that didn't speak English. They issued an internal stop work order to everybody who worked for Krafton, which obviously included Subnautica 2. They ordered all US employees of Krafton to stop working with and communicating with Unknown Worlds. They cancelled work on advertising stuff, so trailers. There was a plan for them to be on the PC Gamer magazine. They cancelled localization plans. They didn't write up their terms of service agreements, which are necessary to get the game to go live, and so on. And then there was that milestone meeting that was leaked. It's alleged that they demanded to have this meeting and then effectively tried to throw Unknown Worlds under the bus in that meeting as well. Then there's a kind of weird thing here where Krafton's own US-based team in El Segundo in California, they themselves warned Unknown Worlds that Krafton were planning to fuck them over, basically. And that they were looking for a loophole in some way that they could fire the 3 managers. So the El Segundo team basically saying that Krafton's leadership was not focused on a successful launch, but instead on how it could convince Unknown Worlds to delay the game. Again, this is an anonymous source. Pinch of salt, we don't know if it's actually true or not. Anyway, the El Segundo colleague tells Gil, one of the founders, that it was clear that Krafton was aiming to avoid the payout entirely. It's then alleged that Krafton did, at some point, offer a lower earnout, but it was not anything close to what they deserved and did not allow them to share the earnout with the full team. So they were basically saying, we'll give you a lower bonus, but it'll be a piddling amount, basically. They didn't agree to that, and then soon after they were fired. Anyway, the rest of the article is kind of just going over stuff that we kind of already knew. It's worth noting that there are key parts of the lawsuit itself that are redacted, so it's a lot of things like what are the exact number of units they would have had to sell to get the money, this kind of stuff. What were the projected sales, etc., etc. But we'll learn all about that if the lawsuit actually goes to trial. We'll see. Anyway. Can't think of a segue. Alright, anyway, we're going to move on. ZeniMax Union say they're fighting for staff left in limbo by Microsoft cancelling MMO as part of mass layoffs. So, as part of all of the Microsoft layoffs, they cancelled an MMO that was in work in ZeniMax Studio. So, Project Blackbird, as it was known. We didn't know anything about it. It was never had any kind of public announcement. From the little that's come out from it, it seemed like it was pretty far along, and it had some really interesting kind of like traversal options. It seemed like it was very fluid MMO, which is rare. Anyway, it's cancelled. But the union responsible for the devs there are saying that the people working on the team have been left in limbo, so they haven't actually been laid off. The project has been cancelled, but there's about 200 developers who effectively are still employed but don't have a project to work on. And basically, the union is trying to get some sort of clarification on, are you going to move them to a new project, or are you planning to lay them off and you're just beating around the bush here? Like, what's going on, basically? Earlier this month, Microsoft indefinitely shelved an unannounced MMO at ZeniMax Online Studios, which is a shock to the 222 union developers working on the project. Undoubtedly, a future has been stolen from many of us, and our community will never experience an amazing game. However, despite discussions regarding the status of our employment, the fact is we have not yet been laid off. So, 2nd of July, Microsoft announced that they're shelving an unannounced project. This was the shock to our devs. We are still employed. Anyway. Where Microsoft has failed to support the talented craftspeople who have generated billions in revenue, our union has stepped up to provide clarity and support. It is true that a layoff may be in the future for some of our members. However, as a result of our organizing, we are able to ensure that those impacted will be able to depart with dignity. So, it does seem that departing with dignity may be the only thing that might be happening here. But, like, the project gone, and they haven't reassigned like 200 developers, 222 developers. That's like, well, one, it's incredibly disrespectful to like the people, just their lives. It's 220 lives that are like waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like, am I laid off or not? Should I be looking for another job or not? Like, give me some kind of fucking clarity here. It's extremely disrespectful. But in another thing, it's like if they haven't reassigned you yet, it's probably that they're gonna lay you off. Anyway, we'll see where that's going, but the fallout from the Microsoft layoffs continues, basically. We're still going too. So laid off King staff are reportedly being replaced by AI tools they helped build. So this is another Microsoft team. Microsoft would have acquired them as part of the Activision Blizzard King acquisition. Everyone forgets about the King side of that, but that was probably the juiciest part of it. Anyway, part of Microsoft's sweeping layoffs that mostly affected middle management, UX, and narrative copywriting for King has actually, as it turns out, affected level and UX designers, plus practically half of the London-based Farm Hero Saga team have also been told they are at risk. So they're being told they're at risk because they're UK-based. Remember, Europe has much stronger employment laws than the US. They can't just be laid off at a drop of a hat. Anyway, it is claimed that these staff have spent the last few years building and training AI tools to do their jobs, and now they're effectively being replaced by them. Most of level design has been wiped, which is crazy since they spent months building tools to craft levels quicker. It's from an anonymous staffer. Now those AI tools are basically replacing the teams. Similarly, the copywriting team is completely removing people since we now have AI tools that those individuals have been creating. Copywriting is just writing text in-game. It has nothing to do with copyright. Despite it having a very similar name, that's not what it means. Anyway, the fact AI tools are replacing people is absolutely disgusting, but it's all about efficiency and profits, even though the company is doing great overall. They are doing well. King makes a shit ton of money. There is no reason for them to go down the efficiency route. Not required, but they're fucking doing it anyway because numbers go up. If we're introducing more feedback loops, then it's crazy to remove the developers themselves. We need more hands and less leadership. But of course that's not going to happen because who makes the decisions? Anyway, in May 2023, King's CTO told Eurogamer that ambition for King was to pivot to an AI-first company, which I guess that's what they're planning here. It's odd that they never have an AI-first company in C-suite. Weird that. Anyway, but this is also in the same environment where, according to media reports, Microsoft's latest layoffs were influenced, at least in part, by the significant cost of its investment into AI. Its investment into AI is costing them a lot of money. We're talking 80 billion just this year, and if you add up all of it over time, it's like 200 and something billion. That is so much money. Like, it's not, and they're getting nothing back from it. Like, they're not making money off generative AI. It costs money every time you run a prompt, every time it has to generate a token, any of that kind of stuff costs money. The amount that you pay in for your subscription is not covering the bill, and it's only getting worse. Like, there's a bubble about to pop here, and it's wondering that if all of these layoffs are a way for Microsoft to sort of cushion the fall when they inevitably have to say, yeah, we spent $200 billion on nothing, basically. Moving on, last thing here for industry bullshit. Developer says Apple is delisting its game without clear justification. So this is over on the App Store. Indie developer Santa Ragione has criticized Apple for delisting its narrative game Wheels of Aurelia. The game is fully functional and compliant with current technical standards. This is their statement on Blue Sky. We announce with deep disappointment that our award-winning narrative game Wheels of Aurelia will soon be removed from Apple's App Store following Apple's recent decision to delist the game. Despite multiple appeals and sincere efforts to seek clarification, Apple has just given an auto reply basically. Apple has not provided clear justification for this removal, citing only their policy to remove apps deemed obsolete or outdated, despite the game being fully functional and compliant with current technical standards. So this is Apple saying that this app was created for an iOS version that they're no longer supporting or no longer putting on the store or something like that. And that would be fine for, well, it wouldn't be fine to be honest in general, but you could make the argument that the app hasn't been updated in a long time, the developer's no longer supporting it, yada yada yada. But that is different from a completed, finished work of creativity, like a book or a song or a film. You know, they don't, okay, some directors do go back and change shit all the time, fucking George Lucas, but most of the time, when the film's done, it's done. They don't keep going back and updating it. When the book is written, it's written. They don't keep going back and writing it, song, etc., expecting a video game to do the same thing beyond making sure it still works. And they've said it does still work. This is lumping all of the games, all like mobile games, into the same expectation. And the expectation is that mobile games get updated all the time because there's like seasonal stuff and there's new things to buy in the shop and all of this kind of shit. And that's also how they get pushed up to the top of the charts, because it's a new update on this game, etc. And that puts them into the top 10 newly updated games. Not every game is going to do that. You know, not every completed work of creativity, of narrative fiction that has a beginning, middle, and end, and so on. It's done. It's been made. Here it is. Like, they're not going to be updating it just for no reason. Update it to make sure it keeps working, fine. You know, you can update a film for a new format. You know, port it over to Blu-ray or port it over to whatever. Make it available for streaming, or for a book, you know, you make an ebook out of it, and for a song, you make the FLAC version of the file, or whatever. But you're not radically changing the song. You're not radically changing the book, the film, whatever, and games should have the same leeway, I guess, allowance, that once it's done and it still works, it should still be available. Now, it's Apple's, you know, prerogative to do these kind of things, but because they're effectively the only game in town for iOS apps, this presents a really big problem for iOS-based games. Right? Anyway, we firmly believe that removing fully functional artistic work simply due to infrequent updates undermines the value and sustainability of games as cultural and artistic products. And he said that much better than I did. Anyway, like books, films, and music albums, video games represent complete creative works that do not inherently require continual updates beyond maintaining basic functionality. Anyway, Statement then points out that there's an enforced and unnecessary updates are a significant financial challenge for a small developer just to update it just to say that they update it, and so iOS won't give them shit about it. Anyway. Furthermore, Apple's dominant position in digital distribution makes such practices especially troubling, reinforcing the importance of diversified ecosystems. We commend recent EU regulations designed to prevent monopolistic behaviors, fostering more fairness and plurality in the digital marketplace, because if more digital markets were available, i.e. not just the App Store, this wouldn't be as big a problem. So it's like, yes, it's been delisted from the App Store, but it's still available on the whatever store. Anyway. The developer has made the game free to play, or free on the App Store as a result, because it's going to be fucking delisted anyway. Now, I am curious if it's the case that, you know, could they recompile it for a new version of iOS? Is that the issue, or is there some other problem with it? And again, when Apple are just giving the auto reply, you don't really know what exactly the problem is. But a lot of the time, this is somewhat of my own background in software development, but a lot of the time Apple will like tell you what the problem is. They'll give you a very vague thing, and the very vague thing here might just be it's out of date or hasn't been updated in a while. And if you just want them to make an arbitrary update, I guess, but if you're in a position where like you don't actually have the original developers anymore, or you don't have access to that anymore, you just have the completed package. You know, you have the DVD, you have the music file, you have the whatever, but you don't have the guitar to re-record it or anything like that. Like, the guitar is fucking dead. Like, what do you want me to do? Would you then say, oh, okay, well, we're not gonna make that music available anymore? No. Fucking Beethoven's been dead for a long time, but they don't say, okay, no more Beethoven. Hey, moving on. Alright, over the community. Normally community things are like fun, silly things, but there's some really horrible shit in these ones. Anyway, YouTuber raided by police for reviewing retro gaming handhelds. That's fun. So Once We're Nerds is the name of the YouTube channel. Was subjected to a police raid earlier this year for reviewing handheld devices with preloaded retro games. So that's kind of the big issue here, is that it's full of ROMs, effectively. So a bunch of customs enforcement officers... calling it a police raid is maybe a bit much, because they did have a warrant and they were like, yeah, we want to look around and take some stuff anyway. So there was a search warrant earlier this year. They raided and took 30 plus devices. The issue here is that under Italian copyright law, there's a maximum fine of $17,000, which should be less, like, I don't know, 12,000 euro or something like that. But up to 3 years in prison, which seems a bit much. I really feel like copyright infringement shouldn't come with a prison sentence unless you can't pay, but then that's like a debtor's prison. I don't know. It just feels like it's not something we're putting somebody in prison for. Anyway, so it's alleged that copyrighted materials from Nintendo and Sony are the reason why they did the raid in the first place. But the thing is, like, he's not responsible for it. He's reviewing the fucking thing. But he's not making it. He's not putting the ROMs on the machine and distributing them to whoever. He's buying, at best. And if he's reviewing it and is high profile enough, it's possible he's getting freebies in the first place. I don't know. Anyway, I have never sponsored, but reviewed with the utmost objectivity, citing both pros and cons of each device. To date, the Guardia di Finanza, I don't know, as a precautionary measure, is also proceeding to obscure all my social channels, thus making it impossible for me to continue to bring other content that is not the subject of this investigation. This is not the only thing he does. He's took a gaming YouTube channel. This proceeding will almost certainly lead to a trial. I have already had to contact a defense lawyer. You can imagine how expensive it'll be. My opinion, injustice. None of my content violates YouTube's policies. Again, not violating YouTube's policy doesn't mean it's not illegal, but again, I feel like you're going after the wrong people. And I also feel like the police shouldn't necessarily be raiding like fucking a guy's house. You should be going after the stockpiles from like Yuzu or whoever. I mean, I don't think you should be doing it anyway. You should be doing the groundwork for corporate. You know, have them do it themselves, but anyway, we'll see what comes out of this, but it's not great. Not a great position to be in, because I really don't think what he did was illegal. Selling them is illegal, but if he's not selling them, and it's likely he didn't buy them either. Anyway, but that's not the only weird shit happening. Esports player named Word, that fucking Hitler, apologizes and changes to, I don't know why I care about being demonetized. It's not like anybody watches these. Anyway, there he is. There's Hitler playing for Team Aryan. Come on now, you know what the fuck you're doing here. Anyway, okay, didn't keep many of my fucking highlights here, but anyway, so he's going to be playing in the Esports World Cup. I'm not sure what game exactly they were going to be playing, but Hitler was playing for Team Aryan, which is, yeah, I mean, I guess he would. Anyway, he's changed his name to Henry, which is definitely, yeah, that definitely was the problem, but okay. Fucking Team Aryan, seriously. Anyway, after being lambasted from the unfortunate gamer tag, yes, unfortunate, that's what it is. Not deliberate or anything. Took to social media to say yada yada yada, whatever. Anyway. He first surfaced in a promotional image. You wouldn't think, like, right then that would be a problem, that somebody might say, well, I mean, the team is called fucking Team Aryan, so maybe not. Other teammates, Cyrax, Devotee, Vishu, and also Aryan. Okay, good stuff. I guess that's why the team is called that. Fuck's sake. Anyway, as stupid and shitty as this is, it does highlight that an issue I have had with esports for a very long time is people not using their names. What other sports do we have people who don't use their names? Pro wrestling doesn't count. What other sports do we have where people don't use their actual names? And I think if esports ever wants to be taken in any way seriously whatsoever, and it isn't right now, but if it ever wants to be, this is one of the things that needs to fucking go. Use your real name. Or your legal name, whatever. But not your, like, fucking gamer handle. Anyway, moving on. I know that makes me sound like a boomer, but whatever. That's I have an issue with it, whatever. Anyway, better news. Summer Games Done Quick 2025 raises $2.4 million for Doctors Without Borders. So this is Summer Games just gone last week, I think, maybe the week before. Raised 2.4-ish million for Doctors Without Borders. It was a pretty good event. The relay race with, like, the Mario Maker stuff is always really, really good. And then there was one where they did AEW Fight Forever. The crowd was amazing during that. It was like a wrestling game, and the crowd just really got into just being a wrestling crowd. It was amazing. It was really good. Anyway. And then last thing, Donkey Kong Bonanza has an artist mode, and players have been having a lot of fun with it. I'm going to see if these load, because they didn't load for me last time. Well, hopefully it loads this time. Alright, so we've got Donkey Kong eating a plate of bananas and also a Game Boy in the background. And then we've got, obviously, JD Vance. Egghead JD Vance. People trying to do the memes. Homer. You crucified Donkey Kong for some reason. Luigi. Got Samus. Now some of them are, just like Nintendo stuff, but some of them are really dumb memes and what have you. Anyway, the JD Vance head is amazing. Anyway, we'll leave Donkey Kong to play in the background. Right, that's your news for the 14th to the 20th of July 2025. So yeah, we did see like the Ubisoft shareholder meetings. Like as I said, they're usually pretty dry. Ferris, the shareholder meetings, they're just talking about what are you going to do to make us more money this year. And they tend to say just the usual stuff. Oh, we're committed to yada 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 for the player, something something something, whatever. We're still going to do some underhanded shit before that. But seeing like some of the questions shareholders ask, like what are you going to do about Valorant? Nothing. It's not even in our niche, but like anyway, and the woke guy coming out, that was pretty good too. Secret Sauce Showcase was pretty good. There's really some interesting indie games there. I showed off there a couple of the ones that I liked that I hadn't seen before. There were a bunch that I had seen before, and they're continuing to look really good. Painted in Blood looks really nice. Neon Inferno looks really nice. There's a couple there for you to check out. The Drifter, wasn't expecting it to be out so soon, actually, so I do really, really want to play that, but I also want to play it for the channel, and I'm still somewhat in limbo with this renovation. I'm hoping that it's going to finish up soon. Thought I would have finished this month at some point, but there's been some delays, so that's going to have to be probably pushed out to August now at this stage. Anyway, yeah, some continuing shit with the Microsoft layoffs still hitting people. Virtuos getting hit now as well, but some of that is potentially, it's not clear again if it's necessarily the Microsoft layoffs that are causing it or just that Oblivion Remastered is done now and they don't need as big a team anymore. That is just a shitty way that the video game industry works, and I think needs to change. But it has worked that way since effectively the beginning of the industry, is that you hire in a bunch of people when the game is being developed, and you ramp up, and you hire lots and lots and lots of people, and then when the game comes out, fire a lot of people. It's hiring and firing thing of the video game industry, which is shit. It's a shit way to treat people, and it means that people don't feel like they have a stable job, and they're moving around the country, moving countries sometimes as well to keep positions. And that was kind of what the live service thing was meant to help with, is that you would have an ongoing game. Or DLC, in fact, was the first time that was brought up, which is to keep developers working, and so that they wouldn't be let go, that they'd have a DLC thing to work on in the meantime, while another team would work on the sequel or what have you. But then, of course, that's not the way it happened, because they still get laid off. So that was always bullshit. It was always just a way to make more money and not give it to the people who, are responsible for that money. Anyway, I don't want to get any further angriness about this. The Steam policy for effectively obeying their payment overlords, MasterCard, Visa, PayPal. I know on the surface it's like cleaning up the Steam just landing page because you're not seeing as many of those games, but that's really something you should be handling. I mean, yes, argue with that, Valve should probably be doing something about that, or doing a better job filtering so that if you want to see those kind of games, you can opt into it and not have to opt out. And sure, that's an argument you could make for Valve, but the fact that Valve themselves don't seem to have full control over what gets published on their platform seems like a problem, and that it's also not just Valve that has this issue. Pretty much anything that accepts online payments is going to have this issue in some ways, in that you're still beholden to what MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, others are willing to allow you to use their services with. They don't want to see the MasterCard icon alongside, big tits, basically. That's essentially what they don't want to see. And it's like, fuck you. You're a payment guy. That's it. That's your job. You take payment. You make sure it's secure. That's it. You should have no say over what I'm actually spending the money on, unless it's actually illegal. And even then, that shouldn't be your call. It should be the local government's call or whatever. Anyway, it's a problem, is what I'm saying, and I don't really see a way to fix it because so many of the payment companies are too big. It's too big in general. Anyway, community-wise, yeah, the guy with the like pirated stuff again. Really feel like they went after the wrong guy there. I don't like the trial will be interesting if it's not settled. 17 grand, 3 years in prison, and then it's the question: is it 17 grand per violation? And if they have 30 plus devices, and if they say every game on that device is a violation, like Nintendo absolutely would, that's a lot of money. That's 17 with a lot of zeros after it, so yeah, that might be one to settle. Anyway, yeah, we're gonna leave it there. Yes, I am hoping to get back to like actually playing games on the channel instead of just talking about how shit the industry is. But yeah, I am waiting for like being able to move my setup to the new place and get situated there and what have you. So we'll get back to it at some point soon. I want to as much. Trust me, I want to get back to it a lot, and it's frustrating. Anyway, I'm gonna sign off. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.